Hey everyone, can we be honest about what Alex Pretti was really doing? I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and it's often said that Pretti was a protester. He was out on that street that morning protesting. That is not true. Now, this is not to say they somehow got what he deserved or to deny that this was a terrible tragedy. Of course, it was a terrible tragedy, but he wasn't protesting. We all know what protests look like. You get your chants, you get your drums, you get your signs, you get maybe your march. That's a protest. We've seen it hundreds of times. True protesting is an expressive activity. You are out there yourself or with others to make a point. If you're a left-leaning protester, you might go to a local coal-fired power plant and stand outside and hold a sign saying it should be shut down because of climate change. You might, if you live in New York City, go to Union Square to gather with others and hear speeches from bullhorns anytime there's something happens that progressives don't like. You might march against the Iraq War, or back in the day against the Vietnam War, or in favor of Hamas. All of this is legitimate activity. You might not like the point being made. Might not like the means through which it's being made. I don't like even peaceful protests. Not for me. I don't like the drums. I don't like the stupid chants. I don't like any of it, but it's a legitimate form of political advocacy. Now, we also know what clashes between protesters and police look like, right? You usually get an unruly crowd, usually at night. You get a skirmish line between the cops and the protesters. Some of the protesters get more aggressive. They begin to attack and push the cops, or the cops begin to say, you know what, we're clearing you out, and clashes ensue. We've also seen that hundreds of times. What's going on in Minneapolis, by and large, not entirely, but by and large, is different. Run-of-the-mill protesters don't, the way we've seen in Minneapolis, track law enforcement agents in order to harass them and try to obstruct their operations. They don't target law enforcement vehicles and try to block them in the road. They don't establish a really robust network to organize their efforts to disrupt law enforcement. But again, that's what we've seen in Minneapolis. There's been some really fine reporting over the last several days on this effort. The New York Post just summarized some of it. Okay, so this is reporting about the network and the work it was doing that morning when Pretti would end up tragically killed. The Post is summarizing reporting by Fox News Digital, which saw encrypted signal messages, quote, in real time showing that ICE rapid responders were actively tracking, broadcasting, and summoning backup around federal agents outside Glam Doll Donuts on Nicollet Avenue, where the shooting happened. Local rapid responders made at least 26 entries into a database called Minnesota ICE plates in the critical hours before and after the killing, documenting the license plate numbers and details of alleged ICE vehicles they claimed to see around Nicollet Avenue. The story continues at 9:50 a.m. Just before the killing, a user identified as Willow shared a 22-second video on an encrypted signal chat for anti-ICE rapid responders. 26 and third, wrote Willow, quickly following up with outside Glam Doll. This is the donut shop that shielded the target of this DHS operation. The video showed two agents, one wearing a vest marked police, studying the front door of Glam Doll before walking away past the sign in the window that read ICE out of Minnesota. Then you get more messages, quote, backup needed at the Black Forest Inn parking lot on Nicollet Avenue just south of 26th Street. Another message read, multiple vehicles with many agents appear to be staging there. One confirmed ICE vehicle seen was a maroon Dodge Durango, included the plate number, redacted here, but it has driven away northbound on Nicollet. We're a long way from, say, Jesse Jackson decades ago going to Stanford University and chanting, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has to go. That's a protest. We're a long way from, say, in Minneapolis, people gathering outside a federal building and saying, hey, hey, ho, ho, ICE has to go. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. That's legitimate. This is something different. This is closer to a form of a really low-grade, almost entirely nonviolent insurgency where you are organizing to jettison what you consider an occupying army. And Pretti, one way or the other, was part of this effort. We don't know how plugged in he actually was with this network, but he wasn't just protesting. He was more, And a more accurate word would be an agitator, or depending on how plugged in he was to this network, maybe an operator, but not a protester. And it's very telling that according to CNN, this was not his first confrontation with DHS agents. CNN is reporting that he actually broke a rib in a confrontation with federal agents just a week before. Here's what CNN says. It is unclear how Pretti first came to the attention of federal authorities, but sources told CNN that about a week before his death, he suffered a broken rib when a group of federal officers tackled him while he was protesting, there's that word again, their attempt to detain other individuals. Another reason it's important to get the word protest right is it comes with a positive connotation in our society. There's an implied sense of righteousness or at least legitimacy about it. But think about it. If those marchers who went across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and now what is one of the most honored protest marches in American history, and got assailed by Alabama state troopers, if that whole thing had played out differently and there hadn't been a march, but instead these same people had gone and tried to track down state troopers, had harassed them while they're making traffic stops, tried to prevent them from arresting people guilty of drunk driving or reckless driving or whatever else it was, the whole thing would feel different, right? And that latter hypothetical scenario is closer to what we're seeing in Minneapolis than the classic protest march. And by the way, protesters can break the law. There can be an element of lawlessness to it, but that is also different than what's going on in Minneapolis. Let's consider briefly the example of Martin Luther King. King got arrested dozens of times, sometimes on totally bogus charges. Sometimes he courted arrest, though. The theory of civil disobedience was that you would break an unjust law. You do it peacefully. You wouldn't resist arrest. And then after your arrest, you'd adjudicate the matter and make your case against the targeted law. And this turned out to be a highly effective mode of persuasion, but it's not what we're seeing in Minneapolis, where people are going out and seeking to harass, intimidate, and obstruct legitimate law enforcement actions. And sure enough, the officers, the agents who were there on that street the fateful morning with Alex Pretti, they weren't allowed to arrest the guy they were targeted. They were obstructed and prevented from doing it. The fact of the matter is, if that Pretti had just been protesting in a conventional manner, none of this would have happened. He would have stayed on the sidewalk. He would have chanted. He would have held a sign. He would have said something through a bullhorn. He might have annoyed the agents, but he would have made his point, and they wouldn't have interacted with them. There wouldn't have been any potential of an incident going catastrophically wrong the way it did. But the big calculation by anti-ICE elements in Minneapolis from the very top, from the elected leadership of the city to these grassroots agitators, is that conventional protest is not as effective as direct action to harass and obstruct federal agents. And unfortunately, this calculation might prove correct. Public opinion swinging the wrong way. Looks like President Trump is looking, if he can find one, for a way to climb down. But this is not the way it's supposed to work. And certainly, this is not protest. If you like this video, please like it, comment, subscribe. Trust me, you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.